Hey, this is Recklessly Skeptical. This is Matt, and we are going to continue our discussion that we're having with Beau, who's representing the libertarian viewpoint, and Josh, who's representing the social democracy viewpoint, social democratic viewpoint.
Yes, that's close enough. I think our listeners get it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's continue. And we were talking about free trade. I think that I'm actually kind of I disagree with you on this, and in some sections I do, and some sections I don't. I think that there are jobs that need to be done overseas. That like some of the blue collar jobs, I completely agree that they should go overseas. I think the way that we do them now is absolutely unethical. We use child labor, we use terrible labor conditions in order to produce the clothes that we have. So sometimes I think that putting out the least the least expensive product will cut ethical corners. Do you not agree, or see how that would happen?
I agree with you completely there, and I do not support anybody doing that. But I think the individual people should be the ones who decide where to put their dollar. If somebody looks into a company, I'll look into where I'm buying stuff, and I don't want to support stuff, purchase a product or anything from any company that I believe has done that, and I choose to look into that myself and vote with my dollar by doing that.
Yeah, and I think that voting with your dollar is an important thing in our social society right now. I vote with my dollars against Chick-fil-A and against Hobby Lobby. So I definitely agree with that concept. I think though that unfortunately, so there are a couple different things that, and I think that we should dive into this deeper. So let's do it. So should we do business with so we have certain standards of working conditions for United States citizens, right?
Yes.
Do you think that we should do business with countries that don't or won't protect their citizens?
Honestly, I don't think we should, but I'm not sure if government regulation is exactly the answer or the way to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because right now we're in a place where we have to do some unethical things, and another somewhat unethical practice that I'm completely a hypocrite on is I'm trying to think, factory farming. I'm an absolute hypocrite on that. I think factory farming is absolutely abhorrent, but I purchase meat and I don't vote the ethical way. I mean, do you not see that would possibly be a thing with also human labor?
Oh, I agree. It's tough because a lot of, you're limited by your resources and everything on what you can purchase and where you can go. So some things like that are hard to avoid. Because I agree with you, like on factory farming and stuff. Like I like to support companies or stuff that I know have treated their animals ethically. I like to try to get from purchasing from small farmers and stuff, but it is more expensive that route, and so a lot harder to do at a lot of times. So I'm could fall into the line sometimes, personally being hypocritical on that also.
So I'm wondering, how do we solve that? Is it just by your dollar, or is there some sort of regulation? What do you guys? How do we solve that?
Sorry, by it, do you mean factory farming or
factory farming specifically? Yes.
Okay. So I mean, I think, and Beau may disagree with me, I think that this is one of the cases where regulation would help. Where if you can't make sure that the living conditions for these animals is up to a certain par, that these factories are getting shut down. One of the terrible things is there are two terrible things. One is that that these guys donate to candidates, so candidates are not going to fight against it with any kind of heart. And the other thing that I find unfortunate is there's not really many other options that provide a sufficient amount of meat right now. I think that we need to this is one of those things like energy. We can't do it overnight and we can't do it quickly, but we should do everything we can to get it to trend in the correct way. And that includes regulation.
With ethical treatment of animals, I do think that's something that should be a protection that the government provides. We protect individuals' rights and life and property, animals aren't, they're different than humans, but I still think we have a responsibility to treat them as ethically as possible.
Yeah. So you think that some protections do extend to animals with a central nervous system, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I can see. I actually I agree with that argument. When I get into ethical debates about animals, I think that we should extend some human rights to animals. But that's in a more philosophical settings. So here's something that I didn't write down that I actually was thinking about earlier this week that I didn't even think about until now. What do you think about the minimum wage?
Minimum wage. I will disagree with the minimum wage law.
So you think there should be no minimum wage?
No, I don't think there should be.
And I so heartily disagree with you there. I think that the only way to make sure that we have any protections as workers is to have a minimum wage in place. I don't. And could you explain how you could think? And again, I'm not trying to frame it in a wrong way, and I hope the phrasing isn't offensive. But how you would think that it would be any protection for a worker in the United States without a minimum wage?
Well, I think individuals should be open to. How would you say? Open to contracts between individuals should be completely voluntary. So if somebody doesn't pay enough, nobody's going to work for them. And if you need to provide some sort of living wage and there's no company, that does it, somebody will go out and start their own business if they don't have the regulations. They'll provide a service. They'll find some way to survive. There haven't been minimum wages for the majority of human history. Different things, apprenticeships and other stuff. People had fair contractual relationships between each other, worker employer, and I think that can continue. A lot of the market will balance itself out to where people find a fair wage that they're willing to work for, and if it's too low, they won't work. They'll go out and they'll provide for themselves in some sort of other way.
Yeah, and I disagree. I don't think that would be the result of getting rid of the minimum wage. I think the result of getting rid of a minimum wage is that instead of companies trying to raise dollars to get better employees, I think you'd see somewhat of the opposite. With any unskilled labor, I think that you'd see companies slowly forcing the price of what they're paying their employees down.
They would try, but it would balance itself out. I really think the free market would balance itself out to where somebody wouldn't work for that, and they would have to raise their wages to a point where people found it acceptable.
Do you think that $7.25 would be enough for you to make to survive?
Oh, not at all.
So,
but there's also needs to be a point where an unskilled worker can enter the market, can start to learn skills, and to progressively improve themselves to where they are worth something.
But
an introductory wage, nobody says like a job like that should be your end goal. And I think a way to get into the job market and a way to start to learn skills and to start to provide for yourself as a child or as a teenager, somebody growing up, and introducing and a way to start earning money and to start progressing up that economic ladder. I think raising minimum wages up more and more will end up losing more jobs and cutting out a lot of opportunity to get started that would otherwise be there.
See, and I don't buy into that mindset. I think businesses will do business where they're making profits. I don't think that by raising the minimum wage that's going to cause – it may cause some business models to fail. And those business models that I'm primarily thinking of is fast food. I think that there are some fast food business models that don't work at all with the living wage.
Right. You raise the minimum wage, and all the company's going to do is react by raising their prices to everything.
Sure. The labor-intense companies, some of them will, yes.
Yeah, and it'll just end up driving prices up everywhere, which won't really affect anything.
Not in the non-labor-intensive things. So, like, if you can make a car that – and so I do believe that in a free market. And I do think in you and me have different definitions of free market because your free market has fewer regulations than mine. And also, I have caps on the top and caps on the bottom, and so all sorts of. I have lots of parameters that you would find disagreeable. Yeah, and see, I think that first off, I do want to note on something that I was kind of pointing at is I think that if people were going to get a living wage, that we would be seeing it now. I think that companies get away with paying the minimum wage because that's the lowest that they can pay, and I think that they're in those situations they would pay less. And I think that $7.25 is too low to live with and I think you and I both agree on that. And so I don't know why we'd lower it more, because there are adults who are making the minimum wage who are barely scraping by, and then we have to help them out with social programs or let them become. I think the social consequences would be that they'd become homeless. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what that would end up doing is driving the housing market to a lower cost, but I don't think that would be the case. As far as sorry, I kind of go ahead.
One thing I was going to point out, I do with the regulations that we have set in place and all the different regulations to enter business market and other things like that, with how they are, a minimum wage is necessary. You could not get rid of a minimum wage without also opening up the free market in so many other aspects that I would say is necessary.
So, go ahead.
I mean, different things, business licensing, a lot of the other restrictive regulations that are in place right now. If you eliminated a minimum wage without also eliminating those, yes, there would be a huge drastic consequence. Like it wouldn't work.
Yeah. So you think that part of what we'd have to do in order to make that work is to get out of the way of new businesses starting?
Exactly. Like the whole system would need reworked for that to work. You can't just take one bit or piece. Like, I will point that out to clarify, like where we're at right now, like you couldn't just eliminate a minimum wage and leave all these other, corporatism practices that are set up right now in place.
Yeah. So I guess, and this is something you and I do definitely agree upon. So what do you think the best route to get businesses out of politics would be? Like, I mean, what would that entail for you? So I think we both agree that there are no more campaign financing, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways and options. I think opening up to third parties would be a huge deal. We could change the voting system.
Yeah. So I was sorry. In the way I phrased that, it sounded like I was more asking a political question, whereas I'm more asking. So if you got to make a new amendment, what would that amendment entail in order to make sure that businesses aren't trying to put in place laws that restrict new businesses from starting?
And you might need to ask that again.
So,
right?
So if you were to create a law, and again, I was kind of confusing with that. If you were to create a new law that was just essentially a new amendment saying to try and make sure that businesses don't interact with creating new so would you be under the I guess I need to ask this question first. Would you be for like trying to get what restrictions would you remove from starting new businesses? What restrictions do you think are there that would stop a new business from starting?
A lot of business licensing and stuff. You need permission from the government to go braid hair, or other crazy simple things like that. Like we do need to, you want to know when you're going to a doctor or somebody that you're going to be safe, and so some sort of at least licensing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whether it be public or whether it be through just private companies saying, yeah, we've tested this person, we know what they're doing, and this is like, I don't know, here in Utah, like get part approved or whatever.
Yes.
Something like that where you can trust a company. It doesn't necessarily have to be through government licensing to know that a company knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And so with that, I guess the next question is do you think some of these practices are in place because it makes it harder to start a new business and start competition against established businesses? So do you think established businesses have influenced politics to try and get more regulation in place?
Guaranteed. There's businesses like, we were discussing telecommunication businesses, internet, Comcast, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oil companies,
yeah, where they have stuff set up to where it's like, oh, they're the only ones that can be there, and you're screwed. You have to get your product through them. Nobody else can lay a line down. They've pocketed or written laws or put money into politics to make sure to protect their interests. That was
protect their interests.
Protect their interests,
yeah.
And keep competition out, which doesn't allow for the free market to work, where competition is going to drive prices down to the best, to the cheapest they can be, where the consumer and the company are both happy.
So, and that's kind of where, so we've come around to where I can ask that question again. So if we were to try and make a law to stop established businesses from influencing government to put in laws stop them or to try and make it harder to start a startup business, what would that look like?
What would that look like? You need to restrict government. Like, if you look at even the federal, and it's not just at the federal level, it's state, city levels, and everything else. But in the Constitution, there's the amendment saying, hey, if it's not, what's the 10th Amendment saying, like, if it's not here in the Constitution, like, the federal government doesn't have the authority to do that. If they actually stuck to that, you know, that would limit a lot. If you limit, keep government restricted to the point where they don't have the ability to put into place things that would allow businesses to get unfair advantages, then I think that would keep it from happening a lot.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't disagree with. I do think that some businesses need to be checked out, but I don't think that's a national thing. That's, I think, mostly state by state.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about income tax in the Social Security Department?
Completely disagree with income tax or Social Security being mandatory.
So do you think that equal? So how would a tax program look like? Because I don't think that the middle and lower classes can afford to pick up any more of the burden. And both flat taxes and regressive taxes, such as sales tax, affect the lower tiers of the economy more.
Yeah. You know, before 1916, we didn't have an income tax, and we had a standing military. We had roads. We provided. You know, the government operated without having to, you know, have a direct head tax, you know, against the individual, like the Constitution originally prohibited.
But our GDP looked completely different in 1916, and also the other thing is that the wealthiest 10% of the wealthiest, and this is the 99 percenters. This is something from their line of philosophy. The 1% is the most powerful it's ever been. They have the most economic influence that they've ever had. I think that what would happen if you let them run the program as it is without more regulation, without something to stop them, that it's going to become even more polarized. And as Bernie Sanders almost always says during any of his speeches, is that the top 10% of the 1% have gained like 50% of all new income.
And I think that's because of more government regulation, not because of less. I think that would reverse it. As we've gone throughout the ages, you know, from when our country was first started to now, government has grown in size, grown and grown and grown. And also, yeah, the difference between, you know, the average person and the top 1% has increased massively. And I think that's wrong. If you open up the market more to more free trade and less corporatism, which we don't have capitalism in our country right now. We are corporatism, definitely.
An oligarchy.
Yeah. We've got the government supporting these top 1%, and these top 1% spending all the money to get these certain laws passed. That's just making it worse and worse for the average person, and it's lining their pockets more and more.
And see, I don't think that it's laws that are being passed to that have caused this inequality. I think it's that it's protections that were in place that have been removed. Like Glass-Steagall is a great example of a protection that consumers and our economy had that's been removed that was protecting us.
You know, well, but you can look at different things too. Insurances and stuff only being able to be purchased on a state-to-state basis. You can't, you know, go to another state to purchase an insurance. It's cutting now a lot of free trade, you know, and a lot of the regulations with a lot of these markets are so intensive. You have to have a massive amount of money to get into any of those markets. Yeah. Insurances and other things, you know, telecommunications, stuff of that sort. You can't just have this small little company, and these big companies have cornered that market so well and have all these regulations in place that they've really pretty much eliminated most competition.
Yeah, and I mean I agree with the sentiment there. I think that established businesses have a huge advantage, and I think that there are things that need to be done in order to stop it. I don't think as much as the middle class can enter into starting their own businesses they could even 20 years ago.
Oh, I'll agree with that.
I think that's drastically different, but I think that's a problem with how much money the base is paying. The base being the majority of people, who are earning money, which is under $100,000 a year. I think that they're paying too much and I think the bottom end of that pay scale is making too little. I think that, and again, this is something where you and I disagree on, that I think that more regulation to stop the oligarchy, or what do we call it? Was it an
oligarchy?
Yeah. To stop the oligarchy from being in place, and I think that you stop that with more regulation. I think that you also help the lower classes of people out by raising the minimum wage and also allowing them to band together to fight bigger businesses. I think those are all ways that you correct the problem. Whereas you disagree and you think that it's the opposite, right?
I understand your sentiment there of like trying to put those protections in place, but I think the way most of the laws are written, we have so many lobbyists in Washington and all these politicians that are in the pockets of all these big corporations that are protecting their interests. They're paying them off and they're getting the laws written the way that it needs to be to protect their interests and to keep competition low. And so
yeah, and I think we should let's
I don't think passing more law, the laws in place are what have caused the problem, and I don't think doing more of the same thing is going to cause the problem that it created to go away.
And again, you and I recognize at least fundamentally two of the same major problems. One is that there is selective lawmaking that help establish businesses, and we also agree that one of the biggest problems in our country is money in politics. So I think we should definitely end on that agreeing point. Yeah. Except I do have one more aside as far as the question goes. So you're saying we definitely don't have a free market now. So what country do you look to and point at and say, hey, that is an ideal libertarian situation?
I don't know if there specifically is a country right now.
Do you think America used to be that way?
A lot more. Not perfectly. I do think they were a lot better. And I think it's progressively gotten worse. Mm-hmm. It was a lot closer, for sure, to a more free market open thing, but it never perfectly, or never to the point that I think it really would need to be. Okay, so, and I have an easy time pointing to governments that I think we should be more like. I think that Sweden, the Danish, and Canada are all in the more correct direction of what I would like to see this country go. Do you have any final thoughts that you wanted to add to this? Not exactly that I can think of at the moment. Okay, cool. And it's been fantastic talking to you. Like, as always, I've had conversations with Beau and Matt, and we've talked about this for hours over. They were drinking beers and I was drinking my Mountain Dew as always, and we were just kicking back and relaxing. So, and Matt, did you have anything else you want to touch on or interject, or any thoughts? I just want to say that it was a good discussion, and I think we should do it again. Yeah. I do think now, like, I would like to agree with you. Like, yeah, I appreciate, like, we do both recognize that there are definite issues and problems, and I don't think any one person has all the right answers. I don't think all my answers are the perfect way to go. And so I think having an open discussion about, we can agree on, hey, there's this problem, there's this problem, that, like, how do we best fix it? I think having an open discussion is really the best answer on, having different viewpoints to all take into consideration and figure out what's the best direction to go. Yeah, and I agree. And really, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we will have to do it again. Thanks for having me. Yeah. And I can I say one more thing real quick? Yeah, of course. I'm not a dictator. I know we all agree on 9. We all agree on money out of politics, and we say that a lot on this podcast. But I think it's very important. I think that's probably one of the biggest things we're facing in this day and age, besides climate change. And if anybody out there is interested in doing something about it, you can Google the Wolf Pack, and they're trying to get an amendment passed to get money out of politics. Okay. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Recklessly Skeptical. Again, you can find us on YouTube at Recklessly Skeptical, or on Spreaker at Recklessly Skeptical. Matt and Joe have a YouTube channel called The Evil Atheist. I have a YouTube channel called ZZZ Giant Awake. And you can also join us in conversation at the Evil Atheist Facebook group. So thank you guys so much. And until next time, think passionately. Bye. Bye.